My name is John DesJardins. I'm the Hambright Leadership Associate Professor in Bioengineering, and these are my notes on innovation. My role primarily is to be the instructor and director of our senior Capstone design program in bioengineering. I also work in the area of orthopedic biomechanics research, which means basically I study the human anatomy from a mechanics perspective. So I'm a mechanical engineer by training, undergraduate and master's, and have always kind of been fascinated with how the human body works, and so the two just fit naturally together within the bioengineering discipline. We work on everything from how the body moves to how strong it is to how it works, and we design implants and systems to kind of interface with that.
How did you get into what you do?
Well, I work in the area of orthopedic biomechanics, and so that's the combination of mechanical engineering meets human health. And so my mom was actually a teacher in emergency medicine, so I hung out there all the time and saw all those mannequins and cool pieces of equipment. And so from the mechanical engineering perspective, I always wanted to build jets, but quickly found myself in the healthcare arena and applied my mechanical engineering knowledge there. So I make orthopedic devices and I help surgeons figure out what's going wrong from the mechanics perspective. Bioengineering is the application of pretty much any kind of engineering or science discipline towards human health. It's more classically called biomedical engineering. We call it bioengineering because our program is significantly older than most other programs in the country. It was one of the first bioengineering programs. We had a graduate level only program up until 2007. So most of the other programs that have gotten started in undergraduate are named biomedical engineering, which is kind of the more descriptive term, the correctly descriptive term of engineering applied to medicine and human health. And honestly, that can be anything from figuring out how cells interact with other tissues or materials, all the way up to designing, imaging devices for any type of medical application. I earned my Ph.D. here at Clemson University in 2006. I joined Clemson with my master's. I got my master's at the University of Pittsburgh in mechanical engineering and my bachelor's at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. And I joined Clemson actually as a lab tech. So I came here to assist Martine Laberge in her, she was also doing orthopedic biomechanics, and she hired me to assist her graduate students in her lab research. And as part of that, I took the class a semester as an employee and kind of slowly worked my way up to a Ph.D. and then they hired me on as a professor after that. When we started our undergraduate program in 2007, we knew that we needed a design program. We had already been teaching a design class. It was kind of a one-semester class. We were offering a minor to other course disciplines in bioengineering. And so after we started our curriculum, we revised it into a two-semester senior design capstone program, which is more typical throughout the country. And so I started teaching that as soon as we started to have undergraduates. I've kind of led the program from its start and then have slowly evolved the curriculum since that time. The typical senior design capstone experience is a two-semester kind of experience. Usually they're back-to-back, and usually they're during your senior year. And the first semester starts off with teaching you some basics of design thinking and the design process. In bioengineering especially, the process is one of understanding what is required of you. So biomedical engineering is one of the few disciplines where there's a huge government entity which regulates the development, sale, and marketing of biomedical devices. And if you don't know how to do that, if you don't know how to follow all those rules, you can't do it. They'll shut you down, or they'll even put you in jail. So a bioengineer brings that specific perspective to any particular device development. You could imagine having a team of people working on on development of a biomedical device within a company. But if you don't follow all the rules and you don't know all the proper paperwork to file and handle, then you're going to get in trouble. So we teach that in bioengineering. They bring their engineering discipline to that, everything from implant biocompatibility to mechanics and testing. They learn about cells and all that kind of stuff. They bring all of that technical experience into their Capstone experience, and then we just need to find a problem. After they know how to do it and all the rules to follow, and after they know what their particular background specialty is, they pick a project that kind of marries the two, and they get busy innovating.
How do you find problems?
Finding the right problem to innovate around is the most critical step. If you don't have a good problem to solve, then you're just kind of spinning your wheels. And a lot of programs do just give the students a problem, or they recycle a problem from year to year as kind of a training experience. We prefer to find problems that actually are real and actually have what we call a stakeholder invested in it. So we work with a network of clinicians that we've developed across the state, and we go through the process of actually shadowing them, interviewing them, figuring out what their issues are on a day-to-day basis, and then we get to work figuring out if they're really problems or not. A lot of people have problems, but they might just be their problems. So what we want to do is we want to kind of rank the problems. And so we go through what's called a needs filtering process. We go from hundreds of problems down to one, and the students learn what makes a good problem. Does it have the adequate market potential? Is there open intellectual property space? Is there actually an opportunity to get it into the hands of a clinician? How many hundreds of thousands of procedures are done each year? That's even before they come up with a solution. So we teach them the needs filtering process, we refine that down, and then after they have the right problem, and the clinicians and a group of clinicians say that that's the right problem to solve, then we get to work innovating. Needs filtering is a jargon for making sure that you're making the right thing for the right customer. And if you're not doing that in design, then in any aspect of design, then you're not doing what you should be doing, right? I mean, market teaches you that the customer is right. So if you haven't found the right problem that the customer has, or at least understood what their touch point is, then you're not designing anything for anybody. You're going to make a perfectly good thing that nobody wants to buy. So yeah, we have a particularly difficult discipline to design around, because our devices are not purchased by the person who wants them. You might design something for the surgeon doesn't buy it. And then you say, well, we're designing it for the patient. Well, the patient's unconscious, they don't care. And so you're like, well, who does buy it? And then at that point, the whole healthcare, Pandora's box opens up, and you're like, well, who does buy this and who does regulate it? And so you have to understand that complex structure of, when we talk about a customer, it's the healthcare system as a whole. And so that's kind of what we have to also have to teach our students. How did I learn to think creatively? I think for some people it comes intuitively. Some people are naturally creative, just like they're naturally, good at playing the piano or things like that. So I think there's a certain innate level that comes with any discipline, and that's the easy part. If you find somebody like that, you can always kind of nurture that. The hard part is finding out how to tease that out of somebody who is naturally not creative or innovative, and that's what we try and teach. So just as you might come into a chemistry class not knowing anything about chemistry, we try and teach creativity within our design program in that very same way. I think in the world of engineering, research, and creativity, failure is a daily occurrence. So, we're working in areas where nobody has done anything before. So if we're designing something, we're doing something that no one's done before. If we're doing research, we're answering questions that nobody's answered before. So failure is kind of part of the daily routine. Coming to grips with that and understanding that that's okay, I think is a major inflection point for most students. Trying to get them to fail early and fail often, and becoming comfortable with that is a really important part of the process. So we do teach that. We try and make that part of their learning process. For me, I've always just been okay with that. You know, build it until it breaks. The engineering motto is, you know, keep designing it until it doesn't work anymore, and then you'll know you've done your job. and then, you know, back off from that and figure out what the functional aspect of that looks like.
You mentioned design thinking as part of that practice. So what is that?
Design thinking is the process of, first of all, identifying and having empathy for the customer or the person that you're designing for, understanding their problem. So after you know who they are, understanding what their problem is, defining that, prototyping that, and then testing that. That fundamental, just simple process of finding out what the problem is, defining it, prototyping it, testing it, and bringing that back to the user. That's essentially the design process. Within the defined Food and Drug Administration's understanding of what the design process is, it's a whole different animal. They use that, but they also require you to document that every step of the way. So when we say design process, it kind of means two things. There's design thinking, where we teach them that creative thought process, but then the design process, which is a regulated entity within the government, and you have to document and do things the way they want them done, and you have to do them for a reason. You have to document that reason, and you have to justify it. So you can't just be sitting on the, you know, at the table and go, hey, we should do it this way, and just change your mind and do it that way again. You can't do that. So it actually impairs creative thinking a little bit, but you just have to know that those are the restrictions, and follow that FDA process within the design cycle.
The background of the majority of the students that come into the Capstone program would be what?
They are in their third year of bioengineering. With at Clemson, they take two different tracks. They're either what we call a biomaterials concentration or a bioelectrical concentration. So they know all about materials. They all know all about which materials work best in the body and why. They have a fundamental understanding of mechanics. They take things like biomechanics and cardiovascular engineering. On the electrical side, they know all about circuits and circuit design. They know about what we call electrophysiology, which is these electrical signals that emanate from the body and how to measure them. So they bring a wealth of understanding about, I guess, the engineering side applied to the body. They are people who, when they graduate, they want to go to med school. 20% to 30% of our students apply to med school. So they're when they get done, they're very well-trained engineers that want to go into medicine. We have about a third of our students who are kind of research-oriented. They want to go get graduate degrees and work in the lab or work for companies in the research and development part of things. And then we have a third of students that want to go into industry. They want to get company jobs. They want to make biomedical devices. They want to work for companies like Baxter Healthcare and Gore, and Arthrex Medical is moving down the street here. And so, you know, they want to go get that corporate job and move up the ladder. Our students are quite exceptional. I don't say that kind of just because they're our students. I mean, I do, but they are. There's a high GPA requirement to get in. The coursework is very rigorous. It's very applied, I guess, as well. There are bunches of different disciplines that you can study. They're used to getting a lot of stuff right. They're used to getting A's and B's. They're used to knowing what the right answer is, and if they get the wrong answer, they want to know what the right answer is. Design is not like that. Design is fundamentally the idea that somebody's going to call your baby ugly, and you got to get used to it. So it might be the first time that somebody actually is confronted with that from almost an opinion perspective. It's like, well, why? And you're like, well, because. And they're like, well, that's not, what is the right answer? And you'll say, I don't know what the right answer is. You're the person designing it, but I know that's wrong, and I know that won't work. Go try it again. And so it's the process of iteration that's required of them. and that's an uncomfortable feeling for many people. The idea that you can put your most creative idea out there for somebody to look at, and they say it's not good enough, challenges many people right to their core insecurity. That is a very transformative experience for a student. And we do that for a whole year. And so they get up in front of us for a whole year and they tell us what their ideas are, and they keep putting lipstick on the pig. And you're like, yeah, it's still ugly. And so until they really kind of adopt, until they really drink that Kool-Aid and really start thinking creatively and innovatively and iterate and understand that that is the process we're trying to teach them, until they get that, they really don't kind of get it. And that is fundamentally what we're trying to teach them, to think creatively, to adapt, and to be okay with insecurity. When we do a design project, they pick a clinical area. And they hopefully pick a clinical area because they're bringing skill sets to it. They've shadowed in that clinical area. They like the mechanical aspect versus the electrical aspect. They've done, say, cell culture work versus cardiovascular engineering, and they're focusing in a particular clinical area. So we assume that they're bringing that tech, that theoretical knowledge to their application, and we demand that they apply that. So we require that of them, that they show us that they know what they're talking about and they can apply it to their particular problem at hand. And that might be something as simple as being able to analyze the device that they've made, being able to apply a certain theoretical tool to it, being able to pull up the literature in that particular area, or test it according to a certain standard that they've learned about. Or even find the resources on campus that will enable them to push that design project a little further. So that's the first thing we require of them. The second thing we require of them is teamwork. This will be probably the first time where they voluntarily form a team, and they have to make that team function for well over 9 months. This isn't a 2-week, make a poster and say goodbye kind of thing. This isn't okay, I'll do all the work this time, but next time you have to do all the work kind of thing. This is a long-term commitment to a group of people that you've chosen to pull off a project that requires significant time and energy, coordination, and they have to make up schedules, they have to have documents, they have to give presentations, they have to coordinate trips to visit clinicians, they have to divide and conquer when necessary. And so from the teamwork perspective, if they don't get that right, it all crashes and burns. We do get teams that do it, that crash and burn, and then they go through that hard rebuilding process. And so that's kind of the second thing that we don't demand it of them, it's required. If they don't do that right, then the whole thing just doesn't work at all. So they don't really know that. That's going to be probably their biggest challenge, but that's what they learn when they get out of it. The softer skills, the presentation skills, the making up of multimedia. They have to make videos, they have to make product brochures, they have to make presentations, they have to think about how to not just get the tech solved, but also the human factors side of their device solved. So they have to tackle a lot of different ways to communicate their device, both orally and written, and that, again, we're bringing their entire experience to a final project, and that culminates with a public presentation at a symposium that we invite the entire state to, and they get evaluated by judges and they win money, and so we're grooming them, for that level of presentation and display of their device, and hopefully they're proud of what they make, and that all works out great. That's kind of that third aspect of it. So if we can get them to bring their tech, to work on teams, and to communicate that, then we've covered everything we need to cover. And the only thing missing then is did you make something that was cool? And that's where the innovation side comes in.
Are you confronted with students who have a low sense of empathy, and you're having to kind of help train them in that?
Empathy is fundamental to designing something. Yes, and we try and teach it. If you do not regularly communicate with your stakeholder, with your customer, and understand why they need what they need and what they need, then you're not making the right thing, period. We teach a regular, what we call a voice of customer experience, where they have to go and say, what does your customer think of this? What does your customer think of this? So, before we critique it, we make them tell us what their surgeon thought of it. And if it's not the surgeon touching it, we make them talk with the nurse practitioner or the patient. We make them go out and we get that empathy, not just from the understanding of who the person is, but what their needs and desires are. And we boil that all down to what we call a need statement, but also from their understanding of what a minimum viable product is, what is their value proposition? Is it making something easier? Is it relief of pain? Is it ease of use? These are really soft goals, but they all speak back to the empathy of the customer. Why do you choose this one? Why do you need that one? And some might just be a color choice, but if you don't get the color choice right, you're not going to sell the car, right? So understanding why people who buy red cars like red cars, it's the same for a biomedical device. A lot of our student teams have entered national competitions and placed or won awards and things. And so just, to talk about some of the ones from last year, they are things like making a cutting instrument that helps surgeons that are doing total knee joint replacement cut off the top of a piece of bone more safely so that it doesn't damage tissues as they're going around it. That's just a kind of a surgical tool. There's a team last year that was working with organ transplant surgeons down at MUSC, and they made basically a little tiny, it looks like a little spaceship that can deliver therapeutics under the skin through a kind of an elution process. So you put the little cells in there and they grow and they're happy in this little home, and then they come out the bottom when they're ready, and they basically deliver anti-rejection therapy agents to prevent organ rejection. A device that assists somebody doing a colonoscopy to get up where they need to get up and cut off little polyps where they need to cut them off more easily. There was a system that helped a surgeon put a drill in the proper orientation so they didn't bust through the back of the bone and cause further damage to the patient. There are infant warming caps to prevent brain injury following asphyxiation during a difficult birth. It's just like we're on like our 300th project, so it spans the range, anything from infant warming devices to brain surgery tools. The products that we make, they fall into three pots. They fall into that was a nice try, really didn't get it right that time, we're going to try that one again sometime in the future. There's that was cool. If we could just work on that for another year or so, maybe we can get that to the next stage of potential innovation, and we'll bump that up into, say, our Masters of Engineering program, or try and get a student to continue it for another year, or work it into a research project for another year. And then there's the third group, which is just like, wow. Those go straight to a patent application. Somebody wants it, it gets licensed out, and a company starts to innovate around it. They are biomedical devices, so they naturally have a 2 to 5 year runway that they have to follow before they're even able to be marketed or sold. And so within that spectrum, if we get 1 out of 100 that actually makes it to market, we're considered pretty successful. We have had one make it to market. We've had one startup company that formed actually from the design team itself and worked their way through a final product and sold it. Had a startup in Charleston. And What we are trying to do is develop that infrastructure in South Carolina to more readily incubate and nurture these projects moving forward. So that's where the whole innovation side of the state comes in. Our tech transfer offices are becoming much more integrated. We're providing more access and capital to these projects. We just received a grant to assist us in doing that here for the next 3 years.
What room are we in here?
This room is the DEN, the Design and Entrepreneurship Network. We call it the boardroom because it's got little whiteboards on it. But it's fundamentally a creativity and ideation space. It's a place where students can come and meet and talk design. It's a hangout space. It's got a lot of cool gadgets and widgets and distraction items, study hall space. But it's basically our innovation space. Post-it notes are, I guess, considered the fundamental tool of design, I guess, and innovation. They're where you can put your ideas down as a placeholder and then move them around, tear them up, throw them away, organize, and communicate. In the area of design, I find it most useful to be around those things that could possibly be used. So you have to find yourself in a space where there are opportunities to just be creative. So also in this space are what we call low res or shoestring prototyping capabilities. Many people think that 3D printing is kind of that first pass, but it's fundamentally not. Play-Doh, toothpicks, popsicle sticks, those are the lowest resolution of availability of making something physical. So we demand of our students that they go through 2 or 3 iterations of making things out of everything that's free. Go to your kitchen, make me something. And they come back with the most wonderful things. But, tell me what it is that you want to make by physically making something out of something that doesn't cost anything. Go tear something apart and bring it back and show it to me. Those spaces, I think, are critically important. We call them maker spaces now. And fundamentally, people think about the idea of 3D printing, but 3D printing is really when you have your idea down, when you know exactly what you want to make, when you've reduced it into a digital file that requires quite a bit of expertise to make before you can get to a 3D printed object. That's almost a final preliminary rendering of your device. And then, of course, access to an ability to actually manufacture and make things, so machine shop space. And so we go from everything from ideation on Post-it note to Play-Doh to rough prototypes to 3D printing to final production. All of that is within 300 feet of us. You need to communicate it. And so you can sketch a lot, but fundamentally you need to be able to physically make something because that's what you're going to make, right? You're going to make something physical. So you should be able to make it out of something. And that can be woodworking, that could be Play-Doh. Being able to put it in your hand and then describe it and show me how it works is getting back again to what the concern and need of the user is, right? The user needs this for something. They need to be able to do something. It needs to be able to work with them somehow. It needs to be able to do a certain thing or interact with a certain environment. And you need to be able to show me that need. And you don't need $500 worth of prototyping materials to do that. You can go over and pull off the shelf from your kids' toy supplies pretty much anything you would want. And you could go, and this represents a laser, and you've got a little, piece of yarn coming out of it. And I get the idea. We all get the idea. And so that's really important. Most students don't kind of get that or understand that until we really kind of show that to them. And many people save that one, and they put it up on their shelf, and they go, that was that first pass. One of the fundamental aspects of design and innovation or entrepreneurial endeavors in general is the idea that you don't talk to anybody, or you shouldn't share your idea with anybody because somebody's going to steal it. That might be the case, but again, if you think about it from the perspective of your idea is your baby, there are not many people who want your baby, even if it's a cute baby. It's there's just not many people that you're going to encounter that will steal your idea. And if you feel that way, there's paperwork to handle that. But it's really, really important to share your ideas, to collaborate, to work in teams, to develop your idea. And to get that hard, cold advice that's basically like, yeah, no, nobody wants that. Or you'll get it, oh yeah, somebody made that last year. And you'll be like, oh, no. And you know, you can sit on an idea for 10 years and not know that unless you talk with somebody. So we really, really stress, not just in bioengineering, but the Design and Entrepreneurship Network, the idea of sharing your idea. Because until you share it, you're not going to know what's wrong with it and how to refine it and how to make it better and how to form teams and how to get collaborators and how to access the resources necessary to move that idea forward. It's just you and an idea that sits in a book forever and ever and never goes anywhere. So don't think that you have to innovate on your own, and don't think that you have to be secretive about innovation. Innovation is a dynamic, open process that requires collaboration for you to make it better. And then you learn the tricks of the trade in terms of protecting it and forming companies and things. But you know, you're never going to win awards unless you share your idea, and you're never going to form a company unless you develop it. I'm John, and those were my notes on innovation.